Hello everyone and welcome to today's session. I am Jayati Chatterjee, the Global Practice Leader for Quality Engineering and Assurance at Cognizant. I'm delighted to introduce my esteemed panel today. So we have with us Uli Homan, Corporate Vice President and Distinguished Architect from Microsoft. And we have Ben Anderson, Market Impact Consultant from Forrester Consulting. Welcome on board, Uli and Ben.
Thank you for having us.
Together, we are going to explore a very interesting and relevant topic today. We'll talk about AI assurance and what it means for organizations to scale AI with confidence. Now, to that effect, we'll talk about how we see the digital enterprise is actually undergoing a massive transformation. And we see more and more organizations are adopting AI, and very quickly, they're moving from pilot stage to operations at scale. Now, all this is fine, but the challenge comes at the last mile when in many situations we find that the outcomes are biased, there's lack of explainability, drift creeps in. So how do we handle such situations? Now, this is where AI assurance has become so important in today's context. Now, keeping this as the backdrop, just wanted to speak about how Cognizant and Microsoft, to explore this, had commissioned Forrester to carry out a custom study through which they reached out to the senior IT leaders globally to understand how they were redefining their engineering core to scale AI with confidence. Right? This entire study was carried out, and based on the findings of the study, we find that more than 82% of the leaders feel that they need to have a dedicated AI assurance strategy. And 79% of the leaders feel that the success of AI implementation is very much linked to the maturity of the assurance function. So this very well explains why we need AI assurance in today's context. Now I will delve a little deeper and discuss with my panelists to understand how do we actually do this for the enterprises. So I'll come to you first, Ben. And my first question would be to understand that, we see enterprises typically have been doing AI validation in an ad hoc manner, more as a one-time activity. How do you see them moving from that one-time activity into a continuous AI assurance journey? And what are the challenges they are facing, or maybe what are the drivers that would lead them to move towards continuous assurance?
Thanks, Shadi. It's great to be here with you today. We found in our study that less than a third of decision makers have implemented automated quality assurance processes into any one stage of their AI development lifecycle today. Now, this is increasingly problematic, we found, for two main reasons. The first being AI systems can take thousands, if not more, actions on a daily basis. However, relying on manual validation methods to assure the quality of these actions is becoming increasingly, quite frankly, impossible as AI systems continue to scale. Secondly, unlike deterministic systems of the past, AI systems learn based on data in context, and their outputs can shift over time. So using static point-in-time validation assessments to assure the quality of these systems does not account for the dynamic risk associated with changing model outputs.
Thank you. This was very insightful. And now I would turn it over to Uli to understand it more from the technology perspective, more from the platform perspective. How do you think that organizations should enable their platforms to bring in monitoring, governance, so that they are able to operationalize continuous assurance?
Well, first of all, I think we need to clarify what we mean with AI here, because Ben kind of made the leap that this is all about generative AI, and a lot of this is, especially the focus he put on about automated actions, model-driven capabilities. But we have two worlds of AI. We have the world of machine learning, statistics, and those kind of capabilities, and that's where the industry developed what's called ML ops, machine learning operations. And I think that's a great example of what needs to happen in the assurance world for Gen AI. The world is a little bit different. We'll talk about that later, but I think it's important to really separate these things. Most companies will have a mature ML ops practice for their machine learning operations, which is a branch of AI at the end of the day. And I think there's a lot of learning that can be applied there. And before we actually go into the assurance part, Jati, I think there's a very important part that needs to be laid out first. In order to these agents that actually drive these actions that Ben described using Gen AI as a core fundamental capability, you have to start to think about identity. Agent identity is going to be a core linchpin for any strategy that allows agents to actually do something on either behalf of an employee or person, or automatically execute business process in an autonomous fashion. Because without identity, we can't really control where the agent has access or don't have access and so forth. So I think that would be the first fundamental thing that has to happen. Then the second part is observability, because again, Gen AI models are different than machine learning models. In the machine learning model case, you have often the ability to, you control the data, you control the model, you have all of the ingredients to get to ethical AI, responsible AI, true visibility, and those kind of things. When you go and use OpenAI, Anthropic, or any other Gen AI model, generally speaking, they are closed shops. So you don't know the data, you can't understand the model, so you can only observe what goes into the model and what comes out of the model at the end of the day. And that's why the Gen AI governance capability has the fundamental model of observability. And once you observe, and observability is now growing from just looking at what goes into the model and what comes out of the model into also what is the agent proposing. Since we're now talking about reasoning models and other capabilities and planning and those kind of capabilities, we now see that we need to look at what is the agent, quote unquote, thinking? What is the agent proposing? And before the agent is allowed to do anything, you want to be evaluating the proposal. And therefore, you need observability as the core fundamental building block. Once you have identity established, you got to go and be able to observe the agent at any stage of its life cycle, be that in development or in operations. And then you have to evaluate all of the data points that you're getting out of the observability layer in order to drive this. So that's really a three ticket. The fundamental piece is identity. Without agent identity, I would not consider AI assurance at scale ready. And then you have observability, and then you have evaluations. That triangle is ultimately what makes AI assurance work.
That was very well said, Uli. Thank you for those insights. And we see it with our customers as well, right? We see a lot of our customers are reaching out to us as they're rolling out their intelligent IVR bots or their AI-based platforms. They reach out to us to do a holistic, evaluation and give them the confidence that, they should be able to, use it and roll it out. And when we do the evaluation, when we are actually doing the assurance, we do it in a twofold manner. We do a pre-deployment validation through which we ensure that the system is behaving accurately, it is ethical, it is explainable, right? And it is, it is resistant to adversarial injections. And then, just as you said, Uli, post-deployment, looking at the observability logs, we need to do another round of check, or we need to rather continue to monitor, how it is performing, whether it is drifting over time, its performance is decaying, and so on and so forth. Thanks for that. So I think that was very, very, valuable. So now we'll move on to the next part. Now that we know how we are going to actually orchestrate the assurance part, now we'll come to the trust factor. So again, I'll come to you, Ben, from your research lenses, based on the study that you did, and also based on the research that you do from your consulting point of view. What do you think are some of the checkpoints that typically, enterprises should look at to ensure that they have trust in the outcomes of their AI systems and processes?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jayati. And really, we found that leaders need to take a step back to focus on internal organizational trust in AI system outputs. In our study, we found that more than half of decision makers indicated that their AI and data functions have a high level of trust in their current AI system outputs. However, less than a third indicated the same for both the general employee population or executive leadership. And we can trace this really back to the fact that many organizations continue to rely on traditional quality assurance methods to assure the quality of their AI systems. So for example, in our study, more than 50% of decision makers indicated that they are continuing to use security and performance validation checkpoints to secure the quality of their AI systems, while less than half of decision makers indicated a focus on specific AI-related assurance capabilities, such as preventing model drift, model bias, and emergent system malfunction, all critical for establishing and maintaining end-user trust in AI system outputs.
Thanks, Ben. That was really insightful. So, Uli, I'll come to you to understand, how do you see customers embed the right governance and monitoring controls to elevate trust and not just have the compliance?
Yeah, so again, I have to do it a little bit, talking a little bit about what's happening. So one of the key things that Microsoft is very convinced about and is investing in is that no single company can solve the agent or agentic AI assurance problem on its own. We need industry standards and industry drive in order to go and make this happen. So if I go back to the three pieces framework that I outlined, so identity, observability, and governance, Microsoft has pushed the OAuth Open Connect, which is the standard for identity that we all use in our daily applications. You might not know them, but they're there. And we introduced specific specifications for agent identity because agents are different than humans, where we can use the same framework, but we have to constrain it much more, as we don't want agents to have long living tokens or other things that we are finding okay for humans, because humans have judgment and so forth, whereas agents don't. The second thing is observability. There is an industry standard that's called Open Telemetry, OTEL for short. And that's where we also introduced a new scope, which is what the Open Telemetry community calls their schema. And we are calling this the agent scope. And this agent scope is something that is now being validated and ratified by the community. And it looks like we're getting very close to releasing the first version of agent scope in order to go and drive the observability data. And then you have any evaluations framework. It doesn't matter if it's just code or if it's a model itself or another agent, that can then use this Open Telemetry standard that is available to any platform, to any system, can be consumed by anybody. So it's not making assumptions about technology. It's simply very Zen-like is. And I think that's the key to get this going, because otherwise you will get agent observability or assurance models from Microsoft, from Google, from AWS, from SAP, from so. It's not going to happen. And in order to really scale assurance, we have to build this on the foundation of industry standards. And then we have to have enterprise-grade implementations. So obviously, Microsoft has implemented Agent ID using our Entra ID framework. So that's now available since November as a platform for agentic identity. Then we just released the Agent Observability framework using the draft of the Open Telemetry agent scope as part of AI Foundry, and it's also making its way into the Microsoft Copilot ecosystem, so that all agents from Microsoft will emit these Open Telemetry standards. And then as part of AI Foundry, we have a very rich evaluations framework that has two phases, which is the development phase and the operations phase. And Jati, you already outlined what I call the forensics phase, which is not something where we are strong at, but that's where we have partners like Cognizant who are strong at this kind of thing, that can look at logs and really decide or determine what has happened after the fact. Microsoft is right now focused on what's happening during development and what's happening during operations. And I think the forensic phase is equally important in order to detect model drift and others. And I think these three phases together, built on the foundation of open standards and enterprise-grade implementation of those standards, will get us into a structured and strategic implementation of AI assurance.
Thanks, Uli. That was really, really awesome. talking about, first of all, talking about the three phases that you spoke about: identity, observability, and governance. And then how do we actually bring in assurance in the very first stage during development, during operationalization, and finally post deployment, as we spoke about, which the services company keep doing. Thanks for that. And even from our perspective, from the execution perspective, when we are actually doing the assurance for our customers, what we see, Uli and Ben, that there are, we generally approach in three ways, right? So we, at the very foundational layer is the data. So we do a data assurance where we bring in, diverse kind of data to understand whether the AI system is biased, is not biased, right? And next we look at the model to understand that it is even able to accurately work with edge conditions, or the performance is not deteriorating over time or over usage. And then finally we also look at the trustworthiness of the model, whether it is giving the fair results, dependable results, reliability is there, and things like that. So it ties up very much with the kind of model that both of you spoke about. Now, with that, now we spoke about how do we do the assurance, what are the stages of assurance, how do we instill trust, in the outcomes of the AI systems and processes. So next, we'll try to understand that how do we bring in the testability and traceability into the processes, right? So again, I'll turn it over to you, Ben, and from your research lenses, what are some of the prioritization steps that enterprises should adopt when they're moving towards higher assurance maturity?
Yeah, it's a great question. In our study found three main areas of focus. The first area being implementing AI quality assurance solutions that have capabilities spanning across the entire AI development lifecycle. The second being looking for AI quality assurance capabilities that are fast and easy to implement across current AI platforms and workflows. And the third being engaging with strategic partners with a broad range of expertise across that development lifecycle in areas such as engineering services, assurance, operational monitoring, consulting, and partners that have the tools, frameworks, and processes to not only help your organization launch your AI quality assurance strategy, but maintain it moving forward.
Thank you, Ben. So I'll come to you now, Uli. And as organizations mature and they start embedding, AI into the high-risk processes, what are some of the safeguards that they should embed in their platforms, so that the outcomes are much more trustworthy?
Again, I think, Jackie, you talked about the model side of the house, which I think is a very important element that a lot of people underestimate because they focus so much on the agents and the agentic layer that they forget that the agents rely on the models. I think model management and understanding which models are you using for what scenario is really critical. Managing the models and the partnerships with the right models, if it's frontier models or if it's small language models, all of these choices are there, but you have to really understand what makes sense in your scenario and how you safeguard those models. That's, I think, step one. Then we talked already about the triumvirate of identity, observability, and evaluation, which ultimately form the government. Now, generally speaking, when you look at agents, agentic AI, they are brains on sticks. They can create a plan, they can do all sorts of interesting things, but they can't do anything without access to what the agent world calls tools. And tools are ultimately enterprise resources that you expose in a specific manner using an open protocol like MCP, which is now part of the Linux Foundation, so the Model Context Protocol, as it's so nicely called, that effectively allows a large language model or language model to understand the APIs of enterprise resources. Let's keep it at that. There's more to it, obviously, but let's keep it at that level. Now, when you go and design your enterprise architecture for agentic AI, you have a number of, I would call them choke points, where you can control how the agent works. Again, they hinge on identity again, and they are really two. One is knowledge. So the know-how the agent has access to understand your unique scenarios, your know-how as an enterprise. And again, there are knowledge management systems like Azure AI Foundry IQ, that I think is an element of this kind of capability, or the Work IQ or Fabric IQ, which ultimately are knowledge management systems of bringing your enterprise know-how into the agentic layer in a structured and managed fashion. The second one is which systems are you exposing? Are you exposing your SAP ERP system or your other elements where you can all of a sudden change the way finances work? Maybe not in step one, but you want to be able to read data from those systems and potentially then do something. And that's where you also have another control point where, with right architecture and right controls, you can now say, hey, the agent can read, but it cannot write. It has to propose a transaction and a human controls it. If that's the right thing in the long term, not. But there's lots of ways for you to control how these systems work. And again, identity is the key, because when I access the system, I access it either on behalf of a person or in my own identity as an agent. And therefore, the normal access control mechanisms that you're used to as an enterprise are there, but you have to have a clear identity strategy when the agent accesses your system, that it becomes effectively controlled. And I think once you do those kind of capabilities, again, starting with the triangle we talked about, then bringing in knowledge, but in a managed fashion, so that only the knowledge that's necessary is being accessed. And then you also have a layer of tools which the agents can use, but also, again, only what they need, not more. So that's a really important enterprise architecture strategy work of how do we expose, what do we expose, under what context, and so forth, so that at the end of the day, the system becomes safe. And then we talked already about the 3 phases: development, production, forensics. And you have to continuously do that and continuously evaluate. I think that's the big one, where Ben already said, yeah, people are kind of used to testing and then I'm done. These systems are dynamic, they change all the time, and therefore you have to continuously evaluate. It's very much like cybersecurity, where cybersecurity is protecting the system. AI insurance is about proving the systems behave responsibly and do that continuously.
Absolutely. So you spoke about the triangle, which includes the identity, observability, and governance. Then you spoke about the controls. You spoke about the context, the tools, and how do you manage it, right? Agents will not decide. It is us and the context which is going to decide, right? So I think that's very valuable. And we see so many real life examples where, because of lack of proper I would say evaluation and lack of proper validation till post-production, enterprises have been into difficult situations. A very glaring example is, we have all read about it, Air Canada example, right? Where a customer was actually connecting with the bot and trying to understand whether he gets a bereavement fare. And the bot was hallucinating, right? It said that yes, within 3 months of the, if availing that, if you want a refund, you will get that refund, which was pure case of hallucination. Maybe the validation was not done properly, and which led to reputational risk, reputational loss, financial loss, and so on. So I do agree that these controls have to be in place in order for organizations to scale AI with full trust and confidence. So that was really great, Ben and Uli. Great insights, great points. Just to summarize, I think we understand the importance of moving into continuous AI assurance with all these controls in place. We understand, as Uli pointed out, that we have to operationalize governance, and that has to be based on responsible AI principles, right? We need to make the processes testable and traceable. So thank you very much. It was great, listening to both of you and getting those insights. Thank you very much for your time today. We'll close today's session with a thanks to both of you.
Thank you for having us. Really appreciate it.
Shouty.